When we first started looking at the 4 ballot initiatives that are on our ballot this year, we decided to really focus on 67 and 105 from a sustainability perspective. So to many people, sustainability it goes hand in hand with environment, and for the Alliance, it's much broader. It's really about people, and it's about quality of life. And so when we start talking about the health and welfare of Coloradans, we understand that these 2 ballot initiatives can really affect the health and welfare of the population here.
And so what you're looking at is gene modification. And so one of the arguments that people say is that these things have been around for thousands of years. And if that's the case, you're looking at cisgenic modification. Cis meaning the same and coming from the same species. And that's where you're going to get that selective process where you could have had something that occurred in nature, or if you go back to your high school or junior high school science, you think of those Mendelian peas and the exhibition of the color of flowers, white, pink, lighter pink, and all that is something that had happened in a field, and you don't have to do it in a test tube or with a gun shooting anything like that. What we're looking at here primarily is we're looking into transgenic modification, and that's when you start getting into gene splicing. And so one of the crops that people are looking at the most right now that is prevalent in our food system is Bt corn. And that's where you take corn and you inoculate it with the bacterium toxin, the Bt, and that's what gets this organism, I guess, safe for having a heavier or a different insecticide application to it. It becomes Roundup ready, essentially. And the seeds that do carry this Bt toxin in them, they're registered pesticides with the EPA. And that's because they're carrying this toxin from the seed to the mature organism of that corn that is then processed and manufactured in whatever food. So this is one of the things that people don't always know that our food is already having to be labeled as a pesticide even though it is the food we're intaking. And unlike topical application, you can wash that off. This is down to the DNA level and you cannot wash that off. So produced with genetic engineering. So if you see these terms, they get flipped around a lot, and I know Jimmy Kimmel did something recently where he asked people, do you know what a GMO was? And people were like, ooh. So don't be fooled. Genetically modified organism, genetic engineering. So we're kind of looking at these foods produced with genetic engineering within our state, and this is actually what would be on the label when this passes. Produced with genetic engineering, different fonts, different things. This is a small label. Proposition 105 is going to require mandatory labeling for a lot of the food you get in your grocery stores. And so we've been going to different groceries and asking them to run their SKU reports to kind of get an idea of what would be labeled. There are a lot of exemptions, and that's been one of the things that we've been attacked for. In Colorado, we went single subject so that we can actually get this through the state courts so we can get the paperwork for people to get the signatures on. And as it was, the GMA took us to court. We were held up in there for a really long time. So we had a shortened season to actually get those signatures. So what we're looking at here is we're labeling packaged and processed foods and raw foods. And if you go with those SKU reports in your supermarket, that's going to be between 70 to 90% of all the food that you consume within or that all consumers are getting out of a grocery store per week. And this does exclude restaurant foods because that's going to be under a different regulatory agency, excludes liquor, excludes things coming from a single source animal, so for meat, dairy, cheese, and then like honey, as well as prepackaged foods that you get in a grocery store. But these would fall under different regulatory agencies, and this was the widest swath that we can get to labeling under one single statute. So anyway, 64 countries already decided to label. We don't want to be left in the dark with this either. So this is the fun one, the tracer reports. The Secretary of State requires that every campaign submit their financials every 2 weeks. As it is, I've been checking every half hour today. I'm waiting for the latest tracer report. This is from 2 weeks ago when it was like $9.7 million raised by the opposition, including $4.7 million contribution from Monsanto. The fifth one there is Dow AgroSciences. And these are chemical companies. These are our major seed producers. And then in between, we have like some of the larger food corporations going on. And I just did a talk last week where I did include in this slide, but I took Monsanto, PepsiCo, and Kraft, and I compared their money they made last year to the GDP of countries. These are on the level of real countries here. So like PepsiCo equal to like Sudan, Monsanto was like Botswana, Kraft was like Honduras. We're talking about some serious systems here. And these companies, they label in those other countries though. So this is a right they give outside the United States, but for our own citizens, they're trying to prohibit this. Within this large food system, we do have some companies that are kind, that align with a lot of our personal values. But you have to realize for a lot of these companies to be competitive in a national, international marketplace, they need to basically have these associations with larger umbrellas. Annie's is a very successful company. They're a company that a lot of people identify with. Yes, it's packaged and processed foods, but it's usually, it's organic. It's stuff that people feel safe feeding to their families. So when Annie's was bought out by General Mills, they were able to negotiate autonomy. So they got bought out. Within a week, they gave us $25,000. So on TV, you might have heard it's going to cost $22 million, and we're going to need a new agency, and it's going to put farmers out of work and all that stuff. Look at the Blue Book. Department of Health and Environment is going to regulate this. The Blue Book standing is that it's going to cost $113,000 to implement in the first year, or less than 2% per Coloradan. And the reason that that is so cheap and not super intensive is because it's compliance of the food, not verification. And when you go for organic status, it can take over 3 years in independent verification and testing of these products and everything. This is mostly paperwork with the government agency, then doing some sampling to make sure that stuff truly is testing as free of being genetically engineered. Consumer Reports, Consumer Union, the group behind Consumer Reports, came out about less than 2 weeks ago and saying $2.30 per person per year just for the labeling. And we also are not going with that zero tolerance thing. That's one of those things that the Department of Health and Environment is going to come up with all the minutia of how this law is going to be regulated. And they're going to do this with citizen input. So that's why there's a little bit of that lag time there before this is implemented in July 1st, 2016. There's one thing here that's really been bugging me about this campaign. It seems like every time I turned around when I joined in, there are pictures of farmers and farmlands. And that was really harsh because anybody that really cares about our food system, our farmers are our friends. Whether you're the local farmer down the street doing like some urban project, or if you're like some large-scale farmer out towards the Eastern Plains. So that was really hard for me to see because this isn't a consumer versus farmer issue. This is more of a consumer wanting accountability from big chemical and big manufacturing. But you really cannot feed the entire United States just with organic farming. Somewhere there's a middle there, and if people say genetic engineering is used to feed the world, that is an altruistic lie. We really are not altruistic people. We waste a lot of food, and if we really wanted to, we can have people eating lower on the food chain if we wanted to go that route.
What other states have done this or are doing this?
So right now we have over 25 states out of the 50 that are in some process trying to get mandatory labeling of genetic foods. California failed as a ballot proposition in 2012. Washington failed as a ballot proposition last year, both very, very narrow. Vermont is the only standalone state that has mandatory genetic labeling, and that was through a legislative process. And the GMA has an court right now for violation of Commerce Clause and First Amendment. And then I believe it's New Hampshire and Connecticut. They also passed it through the legislative process, but with the clause that neighboring states also do it. So that's why the GMA is not going after them right now. And this year on the fall ballot, it's us and Oregon as a ballot process.
Amendment 67 is a proposed constitutional amendment that, despite saying it would protect pregnant women, it would ban all abortions, including in cases of rape, incest, and even when a woman's health is at risk. The wording of the proposed amendment is so broad and far-reaching it would make any abortion a crime and make criminals out of women and their doctors. It would make pregnant women and their doctors subject to criminal investigations, including when a woman has a miscarriage. Amendment 67 would even restrict access to commonly used forms of birth control, such as the pill, IUDs, and emergency contraception. It would apply at all stages of the pregnancy, including from the moment of fertilization. Once again, voters are being asked to give legal and constitutional rights to a woman's fertilized egg, and it has dangerous consequences for women and their families. We believe religious freedom is one of the foundations of our democracy. We believe individual rights and matters of personal conscience must be held sacred. We do not believe one religious belief or doctrine should be written in the state constitution, and Amendment 67 is an unabashed attempt to do exactly that. It ignores the many beliefs and perspectives and individual rights of all women and their need to make very personal and private decisions. The creation of laws grounded in religious beliefs also conflicts with the separation of church and state and compromises religious liberty for all of us. Of course, we want everyone to be able to protect pregnant women, but Amendment 67 is just not the way.
What is the status of an embryo? An embryo in Jewish law and in Jewish philosophy is that it is an attachment to the mother. It is not in and of itself a living, breathing, separate kind of force. It is a part of the mother. What happens when the mother's life is in danger because of the emerging child? What happens? The rabbis in the Talmud recognize that this is a real problem. And the rabbis say that until that emerging child is more than halfway out the birth canal, the mother's life takes precedence. But there is a principle involved here. The principle is that a woman is a full life, and her life takes precedence. If that amendment passes, trust me, that woman, if she survives it, she'll go to jail. And so will the doctor who helped her. But in Jewish life, as long as the mother's life comes first.
And I appreciated you, Michelle, and also Rabbi. I wanted to just confirm what I think I heard you say, and that was, in some instances, Jewish tradition would say no to this particular abortion, but at the same time you're saying, but we wouldn't want it enshrined in civil law.
Absolutely. I would think even the most orthodox of rabbis, and I'm clearly not an orthodox rabbi, even the most orthodox of rabbis would not want it enshrined for other reasons. Not just that. They wouldn't want it enshrined because we want that wall of separation to be held very high.